Welcome to Hard on Fitness podcast. Alan Lewis is your host. He's not a qualified doctor. If you're after medical advice, please seek your local doctor. Here's your host, Alan.
And thank you. From wherever you're listening to, my name is Alan. I'm a personal trainer. I live in Australia, Brisbane. Welcome to Podcast 1. Well, what's the podcast going to be about? It's not just going to be about what happens in the gym, how to lift on the weight bench, how to do squat jumps, or how to do deadlifts. It's going to be a wide range of issues. But we are going to go into the gym quite often, talk about protein drinks, talk about how to train in the gym. But as well, we're going to go to other issues, everyday issues. People may have mental health issues, or looking at people who have created their businesses starting from maybe just a one-room office and creating it into a warehouse with lots of workers. So I thought where we would start would be with your feet. Wherever you're going to go, you walk on your feet if you've got two legs. So I have brought in a podiatrist. Her name is Sarah Gittins, and she's going to join me in the studio today. And the other person who's joining me in the studio is Connor. He's going to do all the audio, and he's going to be an important part of the podcast as we go along. So, for a start, we're going to talk to Sarah. Sarah, can you tell me your qualifications and where you got them and so on?
Hey Alan, sure. So I'm a podiatrist. I've got a Bachelor of Health Science from QUT Brisbane. That's a 4-year university degree. And yeah, that's probably
where you got it? Yep. So I suppose, like everyone, where did it start? When did you come interested? Did you come interested through school somehow, or does it go back to when you were a child? I know we have talked because you do train with me, and you said even from a young child you had interest in doing massage and helping people out. What did you do as a child?
Sure. So I grew up with no brothers and sisters and in a street with no children, so I was pretty bored. Somehow I came up with the idea to go and visit all the neighbours and do their feet, which meant foot bath and scrubbing off all the callus and moisturising, massage, and for that I charged $1 or $2, and that was probably the start of my interest in feet and my entrepreneurial or lack of entrepreneurial skills.
Making money. Well, it's better than sitting in the street and selling lemonade, but I suppose that makes money too. So after that, you grew up and you went through school, and as you said, you got your qualifications, and now you own your own business, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And your business name is?
Earth Podiatry.
Okay, and so you have grown it to now. You're busy. I know you're busy quite often through the week and all day long, and you have patients even on the weekend if you have to. How did you start it? Where did you start? What was the idea of starting?
So I was working for someone originally. Unfortunately, I fell sick and I had to quit working for a little while. I was convalescing, I suppose, and perusing some podiatry sites, and I saw a one-day-a-week business for sale, and I thought that would be a really good place for me to get back into working, and I liked the idea of being my own boss so I could have control over how many people I saw, and if I wasn't feeling so well I could do less, and I could just have control over all that rather than being worked really hard by somebody else, basically. So that's honestly where the incentive came from, was just to have that control. And since I've started that, I've done a lot of locum work, and I've picked up permanent position with working for someone. And I also I do that one day a week, and then the rest of the week I'm just running my own business in a couple of different locations. And I also do home visits, which is an important component to my business.
That's excellent. And over this time, it's taken a while to grow, like every business. And if you don't mind, you're a mother and you're married. And has this suited you being able to run your own business? As being a mother, it's not easy because there's extra work at home and looking after your son. So that brings even extra work. So has it helped running your own business and setting your own times?
Definitely being able to decide when I see my patients, has been really helpful with juggling home life. Pretty much able to pick up my son from school every day, which is excellent. So that allows me to have time with him. Again, I'm just not at someone else's mercy, and that's really important. But yeah, as you mentioned, there is a lot of paperwork, business things that go on behind the scenes, and that can eat into your weekend. So it's just finding the balance. I think the grass is always greener. Some days you'd just like to do away with all the business side of the paperwork, and then you just reminded how good it is to be in control of your own decisions and timetable, and I think that's worth it for sure.
And the thoughts with the business, would you like to grow it and bring on staff and have other branches? Would you like to do that?
I think at this point I'm definitely only interested in having myself there. Maybe I'm a control freak.
Yeah.
I like to treat my patients myself. I like to know all my patients. The idea of having someone else treating my new patients and so on, probably not that into at the moment. I think ultimately I would like to grow my business more and make it really worth a fair bit to sell on to another podiatrist. I think when I'm ready to retire, I'd like it just to be really a good, tight, well-running business. So it's worth something at that point.
Yeah. Far out question. I was thinking of it this morning, and you might say no, so it's okay. We can practice this. Do you know where podiatry started from? The history. Where was it that it was?
That's a really interesting question. I've not been asked that before. In Australia and a lot of the developed world, we used to have chiropodists, and a lot of people consider podiatrists chiropodists still. So chiropodists were trained nurses who did special courses in treating feet, but my understanding is it was still really basically just around the skin and nail type of care, so callus and nail care and so on, whereas podiatry encompasses all the biomechanical and sports injuries and all that type of thing as well. So it's a different field, but I think it probably grew from chiropody. And then in other parts of the world, it's structured differently. So a podiatrist in America, for example, is a specialist, just like here, a dermatologist or a gynecologist or any of those type of specialties. They're actually doctors first, do all the med school, and then they go on. Podiatry is just another specialty stream, whereas here you just do the degree directly.
So again, like a lot of, I suppose, medical things, it's grown into different forms over the years, from, as you said, where it starts, and the idea of what you can do around the world changes. Does that make it hard for you at times when new ideas come out? As you know, there's new ideas about, you should drink a wine a day and it keeps you healthy. There's new ideas about feet come out all the time, and it confuses the thing with different branches around the world having ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Even within the same town, you'll find podiatrists who will treat really, really differently. I think there's a lot of scope for having your own treatment paradigms within podiatry, especially in the orthotic and biomechanical world. It's definitely an evolving space, and there's good evidence for lots of different things, and I think it's a matter of what you research and what you believe in, and over time how you get results. So there's definitely not one single way to do things, and it is always changing, and that's challenging, but that's very, very interesting to me, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. For when it changes. And I suppose, like myself, you got to build up a lot of confidence with clients and patients, and as I do personal training as well, massage treatments and so on, that we'll talk on about in the future. But that with your for you having patients, it must be a great thing. You have to get a lot of confidence out of them when they come in, because it's I suppose you're touching the body, and it can be very personal, even if it's at the feet where it's at the bottom of the body, but it's a very personal thing, and to build that up is how's it go to try to get that confidence.
Yeah, it's definitely an important area. Some people really, really hate having their feet touched, or they're quite afraid of the really sharp instruments that we use, or they're in a lot of pain, for example, ingrown toenail. People suffer often in a lot of pain, and just the thought of someone touching it, they're really not okay with. So yeah, definitely have to build a rapport and talk to people, and I think I'm just honest.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best policy. I don't say that things won't hurt if they're going to.
No.
And I'm definitely very honest about what I can and can't do, and what I can and can't guarantee.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to build up trust straight away when someone comes in, because if they had bad results from someone else, or something's happened in the past and they finally thought, oh God, I've got to come back in because it's hurting, so they looked up and found someone, or maybe one of your patients has referred this person to you. When they have already lost that trust and they think it can't work, it's not easy to regain their confidence. It takes a while to build it up.
Yeah, for sure. You just need to be empathetic, I think. It's pretty easy to put yourself in that situation. And again, just being honest about things. Very occasionally, some people's expectations might not be in the right place for whatever reason. So you just need to talk about that. And again, with having my own business, I definitely am able to give people a bit more time than I found when I was working for someone I was allowed to have with patients. So if I have a new patient, or even regular patients who I know need a little bit more time, I just make that time in my diary, and that's how I get around that.
I'm sorry. So just say going to it. Let's start at all different stages. We know how you got into it, and I suppose you can say the love for it and the interest, and to keep on, doing study and gain more thoughts of what you want to do. Just say if we started, we'll go into a bit of what can be helpful now. Just say there's all stages. So say a child, okay, some children may go into the gym, but let's talk about young children who are going to primary school.
Yep.
They're playing sports. They're running around all the time. There's always, you have to have these black shoes, you have to have these shoes for school, and you heard it all, your mum.
Yep.
Tell us, let's start at the truths and the things of shoes for children. How important is it for a child, at what age to see a podiatrist? Is it good for a baby to come and see a podiatrist?
If you're starting at a really young age, I think the most common question is, should babies wear shoes? Sometimes should they even wear socks? My thoughts around that are that it's really good for I wouldn't say babies, we'll say when they're about 1 year old and they're up and walking, feet on the ground. From that point, I think it's really good for the brain's development, for coordination, for all sorts of things that are emerging, that there isn't an interface between the body and the ground. And that doesn't mean not exercising caution. Obviously there's safety reasons why you'd have a child in shoes, but definitely different surfaces like grass, pebbles, not just always the indoor hard environments that we live in these days, but all this variety of textures is really good for the brain to experience. And if it's uneven, then that helps with coordination and just the body talking back, giving that proprioception, that feedback to the brain. So definitely I would advise people to avoid shoes when it's safe to, and if they are using shoes, to have something that's pretty soft and pliable and just lets the feet do what they want to do at the younger ages. Yeah, as they get older, especially when you start looking at school age, so that's like sort of 5 years, they're in prep now, where we are, and wearing shoes 5 days a week you don't need to see a podiatrist necessarily, but again, same with adults, there isn't a blanket rule of which shoe is the correct shoe.
Yeah.
And definitely you do start to see children with issues around that age, which can be identified by a podiatrist. And definitely for those people, there'll be certain shoes which are much better choices. There's general foot rules, so you have shoe rules where you have like a firm heel counter, you have good flex in the toe. That's general. But yeah, aside from that, there may be specific needs. I tell parents that just to observe the children, and you'll all know children who just hate shoes, and they'll get to school and take them off under their desk. They're sort of constantly telling them wear your shoes, put them back on. They'll come home, they'll toss them off. It'll be the last thing they do in the morning, put them on, and that's really a sign that the shoes are not suitable for whatever reason. So that's always a red flag to me. I notice that when I go pick my son up from school, there'll be kids who sort of just run down the steps, throw their bag down, and then pull their shoes and socks off and run off and play. Sort of one in 15, 1 in 20 kids might do that, and there's an issue there. So whether it's that they've got a really terrible shoe for their foot, or there's some sort of intrinsic body foot problem going on, that always piques my interest. Definitely. And that's what parents should look out for first of all.
Well, that's interesting you said that. It even goes for adults who go to work, and men or women, they pull their shoes off and under the desk, meaning there's probably an issue there too, because they don't feel it's comfy enough, or it's burning their foot. So really, it's interesting you said that, because I've saw kids do that before. They don't want their shoes, or they pull shoes off. What about just going to saying little girls these days? I mean, they wear dresses. What about little girls who wear high heel shoes? What do you think about that?
Personally, not a fan. Obviously, does change the body's biomechanics. Not super strict about it. I think there's a general rule we bandy around in podiatry, which is the 80-20 rule, and that is 80% of the time you should be in something really appropriate, and the other 20% of the time you're generally allowed to be a bit silly. So if it's dress-ups, if it's occasionally, probably let it go. But if it's you do see some sort of preschool age girls, and they can spend days in some really pretty terrible shoes. And I think that's a bit of a concern.
One thing I've talked to doctors about before, and one other thing in our environment here in Brisbane, we're a very hot environment, and where the sun, children play outside, and going back to our days, there wasn't. I mean, I think slip slop slap was just starting really at the end there. And we, as children, we ran around with no hats, and you didn't have to put sun cream on, so on. But protection of with having shoes on is a protection from the sun and sun cancer as well on the feet, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. There's a pretty high incidence of melanomas to the lower limbs and feet. I think it's about 70%. It's definitely something podiatrists are trained to look out for. And we do find melanomas, sadly, from time to time. So there is that sun protection factor, but sunscreen does work on your feet, and not so well on the soles of the feet. That's not where people apply it. Because a lot of men I found over the times talking to doctors, because men, I suppose, would wear thongs more, and a lot of going back to that age group of probably the 70-year-olds or things like that now have found having sun cancer, because the men used to always wear, thongs going to the beach or mowing the yard, and again, there you go with protection. We'll talk about with wearing shoes when you're doing things. So again, the standards of thinking of how to protect your feet have changed over the generations, hasn't it? Yeah, for sure. I think with sun protection, for me, it's always a little bit of a toss-up between getting your vitamin D as well. So being aware and being careful, but not being afraid, because with the increase of the slip, slop, slap message, we're seeing a decrease in people's vitamin D levels, and that's comes with a whole gamut of issues as well for the health.
Yeah, sorry.
No, this is Connor. You go, Connor.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. I want to go back as what you were saying earlier about age and stuff. Like I'll say my age. I'm 21, and I like shoes. I like wearing shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And so from my age, like people who may be listening, who's in our age group, like these girls go like going and buying shoes every week and wear shoes every week and wear different shoes each week and each day. And I want to ask, like, what's your thoughts on that? Like, coming from what we asked about age and shoe protection and shoes.
Yeah, so definitely around that age group, the brain development, proprioception, all that sort of thing is pretty much over. So I think it's a real personal choice. I think if you're comfortable in shoes, as we were saying before, it's a really good sign that they're a good fit for you. I think if you kind of don't notice your shoes, they're not bothering you, then you're probably on a winner. Also, you're not getting any leg pain, hip pain, back pain, that can also be indicative of wrong shoes. For men of your age group, I think there's often very little issue with footwear. What's around there generally in the stores, it's hard to go wrong. Women, different. There's definitely constant changes in fashion. So we see wedges, we see heels, we see platforms, it all just comes as constant stream of different, they're all terrible, generally speaking, but they're terrible in different ways. And I think, for that age group, there's definitely, that's more of a concern. I've seen 4 out of 5 metatarsals fractured from high heels in one foot. It's pretty nasty surgery with wires down each of them. Lots of broken bones. Just you'd be surprised how many girls go over on potholes crossing the road, or uneven road surfaces. Sometimes it's stepping down to the gutter, and where that meets. And if you're in a heel, just once you go over, it's
12:30.
So and that's literally bone snapping or tendon snapping off bones. These are injuries that will be an issue for the rest of their life.
And I suppose in that age group, going to Connor's age group, I mean, these girls and that are going out dancing a lot now, and alcohol as well, isn't it? Is too much alcohol, walking back, tripping, and I'm not just saying females, males as well, tripping. But when females are in, high heel shoes, they're going out that night, or it's another kind of safety issue again. What happens and changes the effect of how they walked, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. If you take a stumble in high heels compared to flats, it's just huge difference.
It's a bit of weight to fall over.
In the way you're going to fall and the damage you're going to do, for sure.
When we say Connor's age, but we're going in between there, there's say that I've got a boy now, he's about 15, but what about sports for kids in that age when they're getting up to the sports age? The Pacific of, say, here in Australia we have rugby league, and in USA they have NFL, and here we have basketball. They do. The fitting of them shoes that's very important. They're going to wear because how much more impacts are on their feet when they're playing a sport.
Definitely, you've got a lot more forces, so it does become a little more crucial to make sure that the shoe suits the foot, and you've got less choice as well in what's available. With footy boots, the thing we see is they're actually zero pitch, most of them. Okay. So really, they're just flat, like thongs, like straight across the bottom. Okay. With some kids, that puts quite a pull on the Achilles, and as we're saying, it's a high forces, high impact, and your typical jogger and school shoe that these boys will be in is probably about 12 mil pitch usually. Okay. And when you go down to 0, that just puts extra strain on the Achilles. So sometimes we see some issues there. But then, I don't see all the people who don't have issues.
Exactly.
I have to remind myself of that sometimes.
Yeah, and what you're seeing every day. Exactly. Well, How weird would it be? You got strapping to. I mean, is it going to be bad? Just so weirdly, and I've been asked this before, and I don't know the answer completely, but if a parent said, well, if I strap my kids' ankles and feet, and when they go into the shoes to give them extra support, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Because again, the foot's not getting that strength and getting used to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's probably got to be a little bit more specific to the individual and the activity that they're doing.
Yep.
So if you're looking at a lot of change in direction, basketball and so on, you'll see that the shoes are often built to protect the joints from those sort of sideways forces.
Okay.
And so typically it's built into the footwear that's required for whatever the activity is.
Yep.
And then obviously if there's an inherent weakness from a previous injury, definitely be looking at strapping or some type of guard.
Yep.
And then if there's an underlying condition like hypermobility, they're doing heaps of training, especially if they're getting into really serious levels where they're state reps or something like that, squad training, then we might start talking about some sort of preventative things like that, because you'll find they're typically pretty strong and fit anyway.
Yeah.
That it might just be something that you use for a game, and then you don't use it for training where the conditions are more controlled.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so we're going to go to reflexology soon, but just now jumping up to the age to elderly people, retirement people who are retired. A lot of them again are going to have different ideas, because when they grew up, my father talked about wherever he went, basically ran around anywhere with no shoes, and went to school with no shoes, went to the beach, park, whatever. They didn't even think of wearing shoes. And of course you would see a lot of them people now who have probably had feet damage over these years, and then there's different people at that age group who've got diabetes, things like this. Just say if you're someone's a child, and your parents are elderly, and you're going to go and help them get shoes or something like that. What would you be saying to that person? What to look for, and or is it good at that age to maybe when they got to that age to come and see a podiatrist and have a talk to you about issues and thoughts with a specialist?
Yeah, it's a really a very interesting area to me. The elderly population, you do see a lot of history in those feet from where they've been and what they've been doing. Definitely, wearing shoes growing up's not always not wearing shoes isn't a terrible thing. Usually, that sort of demographic, that age, often where there hasn't been a lot of shoes around. The issues we see is when they're given other people's shoes to wear, like older brothers or something that don't really fit properly.
The
passed down shoes, passed down shoes are usually terrible.
Yeah.
And that can cause some issues. But just generally in the older population, there is definitely an epidemic of falls in that age group, and it's something that's not really been spoken about. You mentioned diabetes, and we're pretty aware of that, and there's a lot of money being thrown into preventative care, but actually falls is a bigger problem than diabetes, which is just mind-blowing. As far as the cost to the community and to the individuals, it's just massive. So yeah, it's definitely something that I pay close attention to with elderly people. I've got a particular test that I do. It takes about half an hour, which is called a falls risk assessment.
Okay. And
that tests core strength, lower limb strength, and it also covers footwear.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's definitely really important. So that's just working from a preventative angle, and often there's a loss of strength. Yeah. So footwear's an issue, definitely, but coupled with just the weakness, people retire and almost immediately, can become a lot less active.
Exactly. Sorry about that. I have done one or two talks or talked to people on, I suppose, radio stations before here, and they ask me questions like that, and I say one of the things elderly people should do, it's quite weird they think, but say if someone knows what a bench dip is, where you get up and you get down and you get down, and I say to the people who have elderly parents is it's good to say to them to do that 3 times a day, push yourself out of the chair, push yourself down, because in a fire, if they don't have that strength, there's seconds sometimes in saving your life, and to have that strength there to be able to get up, I think it's immediately can save their lives. It gives you a couple of seconds on anything.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important, and the difference between having a fall and not having a fall is just huge.
It is, and I'd like we'll get you back and talk about falls and that method of what you do one day, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's jump to reflexology. I'll get that out. I know that's a great interest to you, and that's something you want to look at, even building up more. Tell us what that is for someone who doesn't know.
Okay, so essentially reflexology is foot massage. There's lots of different styles of reflexology. People are probably most familiar with the Asian style, just because a lot of people in Australia travel over to Asia and they experience it when they're on holidays. The Asian style is very firm pressure, often using tools like little rounded wooden sticks to apply like a deep pressure. The type of reflexology I do actually originates from South Africa and is a much lighter. So I do a very light one and a medium one. With my patients, I don't actually do Asian reflexology myself.
No.
So yeah, it's what would you like to know about it?
Okay, well, I suppose again, I won't argue. Another time we go into history, that really goes way back. Even reflexology goes even further back, doesn't it? Really.
For sure.
But I suppose again, you can pick up sometimes issues with the other part of the body. It might be, a sore part on the foot, and you can tell they may have stomach issues. Do you believe in that?
Well, the theory of reflexology is that the body is mapped in the feet, also hands and ears. The number one principal thing to remember with reflexology is that it's not used to diagnose. So as much as we have the mapping and all the different maps that have been developed are slightly different, we don't ever use reflexology to diagnose. And I think as a practitioner, definitely I see correlations all the time. And I definitely believe in it quite strongly. Obviously recognise it in my podiatry patients as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't use it to diagnose.
No.
And the number one best thing that reflexology does is it gives the body what it needs. So pretty much all of us are stressed to some degree. So it's excellent for relieving stress. Some people will be very, very tired after a reflexology session. Maybe for days they'll have like 10, 11 hour really solid, great sleeps at night. And it's always, that's what the body needed. And other people may not need that, so they won't. So it's hard to generalize about what effect,
how much they need, and
what effect it's gonna have. It's sort of, we'll just go in and balance. It is something that you need to have a couple of sessions to really notice the changes.
Exactly.
And like how it's going to affect you.
Training, you're not going to, first time you're going to be sore, but you're not going to lose 10 kilos.
That's it.
Just again, like myths. Of course, these days with our lovely wide web, you can get any doctor at Google, or you can look up, and I think in probably a week these days you can print out probably in the first couple of seconds, print out that you're a trainer or you're this or that. But you can also look on and say you might want, I'll give my partner a massage, and the safety of giving someone that, or thinking the points, or even 2 points of this, is it the myth about giving, well, it's not a myth, is it true with a lady who may be pregnant in the first trimester or the start of it? That's a two-part question, I'm saying, but what's the beliefs in there? So starting with, giving your partner a massage, and is it okay to press on these points, or you got to be careful?
Okay, from a reflexology perspective, there would definitely be, we're trained to exercise caution. There's entire textbooks written on reflexology for midwifery, and that's actually quite big in the UK. I've heard multiple stories of midwives that can palpate where the baby's position on the foot by massaging the foot or feeling through the feet. So it gets to pretty crazy proportions. We always just exercise caution. It's definitely not an absolute that if you press on that point that would terminate a pregnancy.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's always the risk. So don't Dr. Google.
Yeah, Dr. Google. It's amazing what you can do. So that's true. And I suppose if you're going to give your partner a massage, like everyone likes to do, and the partners don't mind, I suppose it's just don't overly try to think you're something you're not. Just generally make sure when you're doing it, the person doesn't feel pain. They feel like it's relaxing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you definitely appreciate that angle. That if you don't know what you're doing, don't pretend that you do, because you can do damage on all sorts of levels.
We're getting close to the end, but two. One thing is, weirdly, I thought of food and diet. Can that help the feet? I mean, I suppose with diet, the less heavy you are, or your weight is, it's better on the feet and on the whole entire body. But diet, foods, any foods can help the feet. That might be a weird question, but just...
The two main things that come to mind is definitely what you said, about carrying extra weight is a huge burden on all the joints of the foot.
Yeah.
And just because there are so many joints, there's just so many areas where things can get strained. And the other diet thing that always comes up in podiatry is really just comes down to diabetes. So I talk to patients a lot about sugar, carbohydrates, and changing the diet just to get better diabetes control. The other thing is alcohol. That we talk about a lot.
So gout and things like that.
That's something else that comes up. But with alcohol, long term causes nerve damage. And nerve damage is most often earliest detected in the feet, and that's something we screen for a lot. So I do meet people who've lost sensation in their feet, and alcohol's partly to blame. There are lots of things that are toxic to our nerves, but that's definitely one of them. Losing sensation in your feet leads to a lot of other complications, obviously. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, and getting to say the last bit, what you do massage, don't you? Do you like massage? Are you doing that at the moment, or something you want?
Yes, I'm not doing a lot of massage at the moment. I pretty much always give my patients a foot massage. The end, just because I've done so much reflexology, and occasionally up the legs if there's a lot of swelling or something, and I've got time. I am trained in massage and aromatherapy, but not something I'm doing a lot of at the moment.
No. Connie, you got any questions, mate?
No, not really.
Okay. I suppose first I want to say thanks for joining us today and on our first podcast. And I was going to try to start working at some questions to ask, two last questions, and as we go, I'll work it out. But what would you say to me? What would be the first thing you learnt in podiatry, or something your earliest memory? What would you teach your child? Something. It's a good quote or something someone's taught you, and you think that's something you want to put that value into your son.
Wow, that's a big question. I think I think something that surprised me on the very first day of uni, which is stuck in my memory, is the head of podiatry came into our class and he asked everyone to stand up, and he said, if you wash your feet every night, sit down. And most of the class was standing.
Were you one of those people standing?
I was sitting down, quite honestly.
Right.
And it was really, really fascinating to me that people don't actually wash their feet in the shower. They just let the water run over and then just get out and stand on the bath mat, and that dries them. And so I think just pay attention to your feet, enjoy them, appreciate them, and give them a little bit of care.
Well,
soap and water.
Exactly. Well, your feet are going to be with you hopefully for all your life, and they're going to carry you all your life. So that's great. Question 2 is, tell me where you want to be in 10 years.
France.
Okay.
Yeah, on a beach.
Really?
Yeah.
And is France always been a calling? Why France?
Yeah, I love France. So I can speak a bit of French.
Okay.
So easy place for me to be from that regard. Love it. Yeah, always want podiatry to be part of my life, but definitely I live each month for travel, for being in connection with the environment, for being with friends, and not just work. So yeah, life's a journey, and I intend to journey far and wide.
Well, I hope in 10 years you'll be in France and enjoying it, or sitting on the beach, or having a nice drink, or in a cafe, wherever you'll be. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And hopefully, you don't mind, we'll get you to come in again, and we're going to ask people to leave any questions about their feed, or ideas, or thoughts they want to ask you. And that'll be great if you don't mind to come in again.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to thank Connor for being part of this, and without Connor, the audio and the start of the podcast wouldn't happen. So I want to say that we'll hopefully be back in 2 weeks. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and again, we're new, and at the start of when you're going to walk into a gym, or when you start a new business, you're not. It's a new start. You mightn't sound that great from the start. But with your comments to help us get better, we would love to hear your comments and tell us what would be great to make it even better, what you want to hear, and any interesting people, or any people you think would be interesting to talk to around the world, or anywhere where you are. We would love to hear them. So again, thanks Sarah for coming in, Connor, and we will hopefully catch you again soon, and thank you for being part of Podcast 1.
Alan Lewis has been a personal trainer for over 20 years, specialising in massage treatment. For an update of the news, gossip, make sure you follow Hard on Fitness on Facebook.